Depending on how you calculate it, the human body can be worth as much as $1 million on the black market for body parts harvested, or if you just take, well, the elements of the human body, it's worth about 20 bucks. Welcome to Walking Through the Word for today. We are in John chapter 19, and Jesus has been crucified, and now they are working to bury him in verse 38. We see later, after Jesus has died, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jewish leaders. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. Verse 39, he was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who earlier had visited Jesus at night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with the spices and strips of linen. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. And because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. Now, this short paragraph is actually rich with all sorts of observations. I'm going to see if I can get through most of them in the next few minutes that we have. We don't know a whole lot about Joseph of Arimathea. As a matter of fact, this is all we know about him. However, he's mentioned in all four Gospels. So people who were reading this must have known, and Joseph must have been someone of importance within the church, in the early church, that they would have recognized who this guy was. But also you recognize the name of Nicodemus. Nicodemus is someone here in the gospel that we've seen actually 3 different times. Remember, the first time, as John says here, he visited Jesus at night. This was kind of a negative encounter for Nicodemus, if you will, because it was really testing and stretching the things that Nicodemus believed. Yet we see a little bit later in the gospel that Nicodemus actually stands up for Jesus with his contemporaries, with other religious leaders. Now, finally, Nicodemus has taken the final step, and he now has become, like Joseph, potentially a secret disciple of Jesus. Though I'm not sure very secret, because now Nicodemus is bringing and helping Jesus be buried. Jesus has convinced Nicodemus, and Nicodemus now follows Jesus. He is one of the few characters outside the disciples, he might even be the only one, as a matter of fact, who we actually see a progression of coming over the course of the ministry of Jesus into belief with Jesus. Now, why do I believe that Nicodemus has now become a follower of Christ? Well, because he has valued Jesus' worth. 75 pounds of myrrh and aloes. Contrast that with the 1 pound of perfume that a woman washed Jesus' feet with. That was a considerable amount of money. That was only 1 pound. Now we're talking about myrrh and other spices, including perfumes, 75 pounds. Nicodemus truly values Jesus, and he's treating him like royalty. But Nicodemus isn't just treating him like royalty on this front. Even Joseph of Arimathea is doing it. And in fact, John is recognizing the parallels that come with this. In verse 41, when it talks about the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden. Now, gardens are typically reserved for burial sites, but they are reserved for burial sites for royalty. King David was buried in a garden, for example. And in the garden, a new tomb. Also something unique. These were very practical people back then. Death happened a lot. And so to have a tomb that just had one body in it was not common or unheard of, or was unheard of unless you were royalty. So here Jesus is getting the burial of a king in a garden parallel to the great King David. Jesus is being treated as royalty because that's exactly what he is. Now, to be fair, this tomb was only needed for 3 days. But the value that is being placed on Jesus shows that both Joseph and Nicodemus valued Jesus far more than they originally did. Far more than that midnight meeting with Jesus that he originally had. He now sees Jesus for who he is. I imagine they're grieving deeply, but they don't yet know what is truly going to come. And I love this last verse here in 42 because it was the Jewish day of preparation. Now, the Jewish day of preparation is the day that you prepare all of the foods and everything because you're not allowed to work on the Sabbath. Now, this is an even greater one because the Sabbath is also going to be the Passover. So there's a lot of heavy symbolism, which we talked about the Passover. But now we're looking at this preparation. So they're not supposed to do any work all day Saturday. So they're rushing to get this done so that on they can come back on Sunday and complete what is done. They were preparing the body, but little did they know that during the Sabbath God was truly going to be working. That the death of Jesus Christ was the final day of preparation necessary. That no longer would we need a lamb to temporarily save us. We now had the lamb who had for eternity saved us. There's some beautiful parallelism happening here that John is making it a point for us to recognize. This started in a garden and it ended in a garden. Jesus' death, though the final nail is in, or the final stone is rolled over the tomb, it is not the end by any stretch. And that is what we will talk about next time.